From our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., it's Kickfannie's Big Thinking with Akia Garnett, CEO for Brand Builder and creator of Tuesday Branding. Welcome to today's show. So, Akia, what's new?
Hey, I'll tell you what's new. What's new is all this hustle and bustle that's taken place in Asia and the vying of a new leadership position from the region of China and Japan. We'll see how this all shakes out as the president of China continues to vie for what many consider to be one of the strongest international roles of our day with the Prime Minister of Japan. And there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot of international partnering that's taking place from that region of the world. And oh, by the way, there's a great new opening of foreign influence that's taking place in the Chinese market. So lots of reasons for China to certainly want to have that key leadership position, but also lots of reasons for Japan to continue vying for their piece of the pie as the market continues to open to that wonderful, huge consumer base in China and Asia as a whole. So there you have it. That's what's new. Check out Kickfannie.com and you'll find a link to Wall Street Journal. That's where all this discussion is taking place, and the eyes are all on Asia and what's going to happen as the market continues to expand. So it's a great thing that we're going to be talking today with a wonderfully intelligent, incredibly smart, very well connected, and brilliant man who's out of Washington, D.C., has spent his time in many different places in the country helping us all to do some things which some of us may not understand on the surface which is taking place, and that's manage the nation's money, manage the capital here, and oh, by the way, make sure that people who are interested in entrepreneurial pursuits get a chance to access some of the capital that would help them and their vision move forward in the marketplace. I'm talking about none other than Mr. Nicholas Jordan, and he's the founder and president of Capital Bridge LLC. What we're talking about today is this whole thing about 8As, and so now you're finally in 8A. Now what? Early, midway, and exit planning. 8As are, this beautiful type of structure that you can get certification for with the federal government, and it makes it so much easier to do business on a grander scale. Now, nothing just falls in your lap after that. You still have to work once you've gotten the certification. But the interesting thing, of course, is that that certification has a timeline attached to it. How can you make the most of that timeline? How can you get the most out of that experience? And how can you ensure that after your graduation from the program, you have set yourself up for long-term and continued success? That's what I'm talking about today with Nicholas, and so much more regarding his background, his experience, and all the things that he's seen across the country on this week's edition of Kickfannie's Big Thinking with Akia Garnett. Hey, Nicholas, how you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you this morning, Kia?
Awesome. Welcome to the show.
Excellent. Glad to be here. And also wanted to thank all the veterans for their service. I know today is Veterans Day, so wanted to thank everybody that served our country proudly.
Absolutely. The soil of America is worth protecting. And it is a brave soul who could stand there and offer such selfless acts of protection, many times for people who don't even understand what's taking place. And so I thank you for bringing that up and acknowledging our wonderful veterans. So, Nicholas, you've done some amazing things, and I think we should start right at Wall Street, because first of all, find that fascinating. I love Wall Street and the whole concept of Wall Street. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the romanticism of Wall Street, especially, when you've got great movies hitting the market like The Wolf of Wall Street and the great work that Matthew McConaughey and Leonardo DiCaprio did in that blockbuster motion picture. How was your experience there? Was it anything like that?
I think it was. I think those are excellent movies. Certainly enjoyed them myself. My experience was a little different. I think most of the folks on the street will tell you that their experiences were a little different as well. So, it was a fascinating time to be there during the market crash. Certainly very tumultuous and just very daunting. But I was on the debt side of our investment bank. I was with Citigroup, and on a weekly basis, and for a few weeks on a daily basis, we were so concerned about, either ourselves going under or, our peers going under. And, as we saw, some of our peers did go under. I was sitting at my desk when Lehman Brothers went under, and I got a call from one of my closest friends, asking me what she should do now because, her bank went under and she just didn't have any sense of what what was taking place next. But
and
very difficult time. And I think one thing that a lot of folks in the public outside of Wall Street probably were not aware of is how tied in some of these institutions are, especially the larger financial institutions. How many different businesses that their loans and their lines of credit and their capital and their services support. And so I spent time with my power and energy and chemical companies, and there are many companies across the country that if they didn't have access to capital, they wouldn't be able to turn on their everybody's lights, and so they needed the cash to continue to operate and to continue to ensure that everybody else's businesses and our homes and our lives could continue to function normally. So it's very, very, very daunting time, but it certainly taught me a lot, and I'm thankful for those experiences that I had.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that you say that, because that most people don't think about the interconnectedness of a bank that's sitting on Wall Street and how it has, its tentacles, if you will, at the highest levels of the economy, but at the very lowest levels of the economy, such as just basic cash flow on the streets.
Yep, absolutely.
And my question to you is, how do you make that transition from Wall Street to Capitol Hill? Not that doesn't happen, and not that, we don't see a lot of people who bring their finance experience to Washington, D.C. and use that as a way to lobby for certain legislation or build relationships with the key lawmakers and decision makers. I mean, it happens every day. In your particular instance, what was the stimulus that provided, that exit for you to come and put your experience to use in Washington, D.C.?
I think it was, it was twofold. One, I remember the day that we were just on our way to lunch when I was at Citigroup, and we went to one of our local favorite diners, Pig and Whistle, and when we came back, all the TVs were off in the lobby. For those of you that have been inside of the big banks or most big companies, they've got TVs everywhere, and so they were off. And at that time, the stock price had dropped below $1, and people were in the office, crying, and all kinds of other stuff. And so, at that moment in time, I was pretty set on making a change, and so I had some relationships with a member of Congress that had just won, and was interested in somebody that would come down and spend, help him kind of navigate Washington. And help plan his schedule and his time, and sort of be with him every step of the way. And so I decided to leave and take that job, knowing that there would be a lot of great opportunities to meet very, very interesting people, diverse sets of people, and get a real inside sense of how the lawmaking process worked. So I left, and I joined his office on the Hill, and we spent quite a bit of time driving all over our district, meeting with constituents, and and really trying to work to fix all different types of issues. So it was a great experience, and 2 weeks after departing Wall Street, where I'm calling up my former bosses and colleagues up there to get their thoughts on ideas for legislation that we had, to get their their comments on on bills that were being written at the time. So it really was a fascinating experience. It was very, very helpful, and really just gaining an understanding of how the process really works.
Wow, and that gave you so much insight into the legislative side of things, of course, and you get to bring all that practical experience to the process of lawmaking, even if it's moving your ideas and concepts and direction through key persons who are standing there and sometimes filibustering on the floor.
Yes, we saw a lot of that.
Yeah,
a lot of that for sure.
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And it's just such an interesting time, especially with all the venture capitalism that takes place, and and the just the whole concept of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, if you will, and this whole idea of the public taking the reins from the banks to help business owners fund their dreams. So I like to call it dream funding. I know there are lots of different terms out there for gaining access to capital, and you are just all in that world with what you do through Capital Bridge. And the amazing thing is that, a lot of people have begun to understand what crowdfunding is based on some of the tools that are used today, like the GoFundMe and the Indiegogo and the other crowdfunding sites. But crowdfunding, it means something different. It's bigger than the tools that are used. And states, of course, across the country are acting in different ways to open up opportunities in some cases, but also regulate opportunities for people to get their hands on the capital that they need to fund their dreams. What have you seen, and specifically in this region of the country?
And so what's been really interesting, and I think the market crash and the bank bailouts made really changed the landscape for access to capital for specifically small businesses. And you'll hear this as a area of focus and a problem area across the board. And so because of the new regulations on banks, they feel that it's very difficult for them to lend in the ways that they had before the market crash. And so what that's done is it's really pinched the capital sources and really reduced the overall access to capital that small businesses have. So where you would normally find businesses that can qualify for traditional bank financing at reasonable interest rates, you're now seeing folks turning to other alternative sources of capital. Some of these might include factoring, asset or other types of asset-based lending, purchase order financing, kind of different things that they might not normally use, but because it's more difficult to qualify for financing that they need to grow, companies are turning to alternative sources of capital. One of the new, most exciting, in my mind, opportunities for small businesses and private investors as well is around crowdfunding. Mm-hmm. And so the SEC had passed the Jobs Act, which basically has transformed the securities law and has allowed for non-accredited investors to gain access and invest in private companies. And so for those that may not be familiar with who would typically qualify as a non-accredited investor, it would be individuals that have a net worth of less than $1 million, or have earned less than 250K or have earned less than 250K annually, or 300,000 with a spouse in the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've earned less than $1 million, or have earned less than 200,000 or 300,000 with a spouse in the past 2 years, you are now eligible through this law that the SEC is still working on. So it's not finalized yet, but this is what the proposed rules would state. You now have access and the ability to invest in new companies where you wouldn't have before. And what this does is it creates a shift in my opinion, the ability to generate wealth and to, and gain access to capital as well. And so what you will find is that you're going to have all kinds of new companies that are coming to the table that are interested in raising debt and raising equity. And so as a small business, you're now able to go out to the crowd and raise this type of debt and equity where you would normally have to go through private placement memos and work with investment banks. And, it's just a process that's not open to everybody. Not everybody has that investing experience in that background. And so this really is sort of a paradigm shift in securities law, and I think is going to play a major role in economic development throughout the nation.
Yeah.
And so what you've seen now is because the SEC has, they've taken some time to finalize these rules, states have seen the opportunity to deploy this, this method of alternative capital raising, and they've gone out and created their own state exemptions. And these are basically pieces of legislation that continue to allow folks to take part in this process. And so, in the state of Virginia, for example, we are working to pass our own state exemption. So there was legislation introduced by a state senator here last year.
Mm-hmm.
They did not pass. The state was not ready to take it up. We're hoping that they will take it up this year because D.C. has passed it. Indiana has its own version. I believe North Carolina's got a version that they've passed. And so we're hopeful that the state will take this up and ultimately pass it so that we can, our investors and, the folks within our communities can really take advantage of this opportunity. And what you'll find is that there are going to be all different types of platforms and portals that are affinity-based that will allow you to invest in specific types of things. So you think about your Indiegogos, your Kickstarters, and those folks.
Yeah.
They're very focused on, a lot of times you can focus on your own project. They're focused on helping you raise the capital. But, you can be more specialized. And so I'm working with a company right now that has generated their own platform for minority-owned businesses. And their goal is to attract minority-owned investors and give them a platform that they can look to invest in minority-owned businesses.
Yeah.
And you'll see, there are other companies that have popped up that are interested in presenting real estate opportunities for folks to invest in, or restaurants and other things. So there's going to be this movement of portals and platforms that are going to come out that are going to offer very specific investment opportunities. And it really is going to change the way that companies raise capital. And I think it's going to be a fantastic endeavor. And I think, certainly not without its challenges, but I think it's going to be a great opportunity for a lot of folks to raise the capital and secure the funding that they need to grow their businesses.
Yeah, wow. And, I have two questions for you. And this is really in reference to the big banks and inflation. When it comes to the big banks and their, having been if you will, circumvented in the process. What do you think will be the long-term shakeout of it all? I mean, I hope to see that it would just settle and this whole crowd funding thing would just be a regular part of the economy that has normalized itself in some way. But I can't help but think of inflation taking place, whereby you've got people being funded to present their wares in the marketplace, and it's as if the money is coming from their own accounts, but in actuality, it's coming from the same accounts that could have or would have been invested by the banks if the private funders who are participating in these crowdfunding programs would put their money in banks or mutual funds or wherever else they would have otherwise put them. How do you see that all shaking itself out?
I think it will be. We'll have to see. The overall popularity and how quickly individuals sign on and take part in the process. So, I think there is an element, for investors present now where, folks are looking for yield. And so, because of the current interest rate environment, investors are not seeing the type of returns that, they've seen in the past or may want to see, both in the stock market, which is, extremely volatile, and, and other types of investment opportunities. People are excited about the startup culture and the small business culture, and I think you're seeing a real strong interest from, folks in every space in investing, and a lot of people are looking to park cash in some of these businesses, and so I think you will see, you'll continue to see this as an option. I think it will grow. I don't think the traditional banks and the roles that they play will be, affected as much, especially because this is usually an earlier stage endeavor, and so the companies that are taking on this sort of financing, whether it's debt or equity, oftentimes would not qualify for the traditional bank financing, or as they grow, the type of services that an investment bank or private equity firm would offer you, in terms of IPOs or large scale mergers or things like that. And so I think it fills a niche that is currently not there.
Yeah.
But I think folks are just going to have to do their best to get comfortable with the concept. It's going to have to play out. There's going to be some litigation, and there will be some fraud, no doubt about it. But I think that this will be a great opportunity, and it will fill a need that's not there, that I think is at the front of the process. Whereas some of the other traditional banking and and securities products will come later as these companies continue to grow.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you for saying that. And also, I know that people who are looking for opportunities to mature their businesses and their brands are wanting to jump in on the whole crowdfunding thing. But what also is interesting is how, in my mind, I see it indirectly impacting the whole 8A program and process as well. And where, there is some connectedness with accessing capital to build the brand, to build that portfolio of business and that portfolio of work done. You get a chance to do a bit more of that even before putting yourself in the space to be considered or to gain certification for the 8A process, making a much more mature business in terms of operations, in terms of the ability to show work performed and projects completed, and to understand best practices in your industry. I do believe that it could make a much more robust and mature small business that is thereby better able to take advantage of the opportunity of gaining certification with programs such as the 8A program. And so I know that you've got some specific tips for folks when it comes to how they can present themselves at the beginning of, say, for instance, gaining access to the certification process through 8As, and then midway through it, and then also the exit strategy. Because, again, in my mind, as I see it, with inflation potentially creeping in, as a result of businesses that are not really truly mature enough to sustain their long-term success, when you've got an opportunity like, the 8A program to help you maintain funding and opportunities to projects over an extended period of time, you have additional time to catch up, regardless of how you got to that gate. So can you talk to us about what your experience has been around, say, the 8A programs and working with companies that have found themselves in that process and wanting to take greater advantage of the timeline?
Absolutely. And so I've worked with, in and around 8As in a number of different capacities, both as, business development hat, and then, also working in mergers and acquisitions. So we were, at one point in time, it was with Deloitte, and we were looking to acquire new businesses that, fit our growth model. And so looking strategically at the time at cybersecurity and some human capital solutions and some geospatial solutions and those sorts of things. And so, looking at small businesses that possessed those sorts of skill sets was a key priority for us and was part of our growth plan. And I think, with large businesses specifically, many of them are acquisitive because it allows you to gain access to, to the types of vehicles that you need to do business with the government. It gives you capabilities and past performance, and that's really, really important when you're trying to do business with the government and on the commercial side as well. And so I think those same considerations, many of them apply. I think when you're first starting out from, with your 8A, I think that there are a couple considerations that need to be taken place, and I think the biggest key is really the exit strategy. And so you've got to plan early how you want to exit the 8A program and ultimately what you want to do with your business. There are a lot of folks that run traditional lifestyle businesses, and so they live off the business. They put a lot of their expenses and things like that through the company, which is not a problem, again, as long as you adhere to all of the various accounting standards and the rules associated with that. And, you can carve out an indirect rate structure and a wrap rate and all these different things that supports, your ability to win work and price your services and products effectively. But if you are interested in exiting and selling your business, even as an 8A, you're going to need to ensure that you've got a diverse portfolio of business. And so that is a mix of commercial work. It can be traditional 8A work as well. And then you want to compete for as many full and open contracts as you can. And by full and open competition, we mean opportunities that the government puts out that anybody can bid on. So you're not mandated to, it's not, the opportunity is not slated for an 8A firm or a hub zone or something. Anybody can participate. And the reason that is important is because a lot of times, and I'll use Deloitte again as an example, we were looking to invest in businesses and acquire them and bring them into our company, and we could take over those contracts, and that process is called novating them. So because we were not an 8A, we could not novate a contract and change the name of the company and bring the contract over to us. We couldn't operate that contract, so it really was not helpful for us. It was, it was a non-starter. And so when we would look at companies that were interested in selling, there were some great companies. I mean, fantastic companies. But their mix of 8A contracts was too high, and it made the total value of the business not within our parameters when we, kind of backed out those contracts. And so that's going to be a key consideration for a lot of businesses. And so the more that you can win full and open work, the better prepared you will be, upon exit. And so you're going to get used to competing against some of the larger primes. You're going to get used to competing against companies that were 8A but have since grown out of the program. And so, that process and the rigor that's associated with, bidding on larger proposals and things like that, it's really helpful. It's really helpful. And you really want to make sure that you get to know and understand and do business with some of the larger primes if possible, because they do a good job and they've got really tight proposal staff and processes and procedures. And you really, if you're going to be successful in the contracting space, you've got to emulate a lot of those behaviors, and you've got to be very diligent in your pursuit of these contracts. So, I think really being thoughtful about what you want, your company to look like in 10, 15 years, and how you plan to exit is really, really key. I think that's really, really important.
Wow. And so do you have any examples, even from a generic point of view of companies that really did maximize that timeline through the 8A program? I mean, I've got one specific example of a company that's in Alexandria, Virginia, Integrated Systems Analysts, Inc., and they didn't just graduate the program, they actually left the program before it was done because they had done just what they wanted to do while in that program. That's a company that I used to work for in the past, and I was business development and marketing manager for them. What examples have you seen of companies that really have just done an amazing job maximizing that timeline and really not just coming out on top as a business to government strong portfolio company, but one, as you said, that has a diverse mix of commercial and also government contracts and awards?
I think there are countless examples. I think some of those in the news, the Microtechs and some of the other folks that are, have grown out of the programs and have done it. There are a lot of folks that have done it successfully, and I think thoughtful, smart growth is important. I know I've got a number of clients now that are kind of thinking through their exit strategies and wondering, should I go out and acquire a business that is going to, take me out of my, kind of growth and, out of my size standards now, or do I wait and kind of, stay small and really hone my, my practices and get my past performance together. So I think there are a lot of considerations, for sure. I think some things that are interesting and, different opportunities that might not necessarily be, as public are, companies that have gotten their start, within the 8A program, but also outside the 8A program, that have used the government and the opportunities to serve the government as, sources of funding for, innovative technology and, really to spur their growth. And so I was talking to an Army colonel yesterday over breakfast, and he had mentioned a company that he had taken an interest in many years ago, and he kind of watched them grow and navigate. But one of the first contracts they got was $1 million contract from the Army, and so they were producing some interesting technology, and that one contract really spurred their growth, and that company was Red Hat.
Yeah.
And so for many folks are familiar with that company, but there are another number of other agencies that have innovation centers like the VA. There are a number of agencies within HHS, Health and Human Services, that issue contracts for new and innovative ideas. And so, it's not conventional venture capital. And so, I think New York and, in Silicon Valley in some cases, don't offer the same sorts of financing sources, but, there are plenty of companies that have started and have offered services to the government or products to the government, as a small business, and they've grown. I think Palantir is another great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
They work in and around, almost every agency there is, and they're very strong within the commercial side as well. And so I think, striking that diverse mix is fantastic. And if you're fortunate enough to qualify for an 8A or some of the other HubZone SDVOSB or some of the other vehicles out there, certainly take advantage of them, but understand the nuances of the program. But otherwise, really do some digging, utilize your relationships, and figure out where there's opportunities for you to really break in. And this is businesses of all sizes, especially, larger companies that can afford to, invest in senior officials and, helping them, folks that'll help them navigate, various agencies, and, they can invest in R&D and, internally can develop really innovative solutions.
Yeah.
I think it's important. So, there's a lot of good opportunities out there for sure.
Yeah. And, I'm just excited about this conversation. It's just so rich in information and direction. We've gone in several different directions regarding finding traditional and non-traditional funding sources to dream fund, to get your dream from your head into reality, into the marketplace, into fruition, into success, not just for yourself, but for all of the stakeholders and people that you wish to see as beneficiaries of your genius, of your brilliant idea that you have fostered and nurtured and have a chance to see it put to action, and then there's all this other stuff that's out there, and I just love having conversations with people like you, Nicholas, who can, with my brain, go with me on these journeys throughout all these little pockets of interest that I have, especially things like the Bitcoin. That's something that's out there, and it's something that I've been following since it became more of a mainstream interest. Not exactly mainstream yet, but I'd say mainer, and that's not really a word. I'm giving it a word. It's picking up some traction. I don't know if it's here to stay or not, but it certainly is continuing to find its way into the general discussions that we're having around small business and business in general, and non-traditional currencies or ways to fund whatever it is that you need to get funded. What has been your understanding of this interest that is taking place, and what do you see?
So I'm glad that you've been studying Bitcoin, so maybe you can help me understand the currency value fluctuations and all that stuff. We'll have to talk about that offline. I'm curious to learn some more about it. But I've read about it. I've spent some time talking with friends about it. I have friends, especially in the IT community, that mine Bitcoins. They've set up some of them pretty impressive server environments in their homes and in their offices. I haven't, really jumped into it myself personally. I think it's certainly interesting.
Yeah.
I think that it plays a role. I imagine in our society, and it seems that way because it really is turning into a mainstream currency. I know friends in San Francisco and New York that their buildings offer the ability to pay in Bitcoins, and so this is not something that I think is going away. I'll be curious to see how the federal government regulates this currency and other alternative currencies that come up. I'm not sure what that process looks like yet, but we've seen theft in that space and fraud in that space, and it's thriving again, and it's not necessarily going away. And so I'm very excited to see how it all shakes out, and really how it how pervasive it ends up becoming. But it seems that it's here to stay. So I look forward to seeing how it all develops.
And I like to look at it as this, it's a currency for geeks who, are really just saying, hey, and to me, honestly, it just, aside from it being, is really, a different way of doing business and getting the things that you need, gaining access to tools and resources and equipment and so forth that you need to stimulate your business. It's kind of like, to me, gold. Everybody knows what it is, in terms of it, recognizing it as a currency. And we know it's got some worth, but, who can help you trade it aside from going to a street vendor or, someone who actually can give you the conversion and so forth. It's not really it's not practical at this point, if you will, on the street level. And so, and I don't think the federal government completely understands what to do with it just yet. Regulation is just around the corner with it as soon as that part is figured out. And maybe it'll become a real, respected outlet or not. I think it's still too soon to tell, but it certainly is interesting, and it sounds as if you are intrigued. So that's enough.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm very intrigued. I think a lot of people are. It's certainly interesting.
Yeah. So for me, with you, and I look at all the great things that you've done in your career, which is so very, very impressive. And then I look at the other things that sort of fill your timeline when it comes to the nonprofit work that you've done, Nicholas. And it's, one of the things that I think is holding this crowdfunding concept together is the social responsibility that comes along with it. So it's more than just people gaining access to money to Dream Fund, but it's people who want to see something good happen with the money that they've earned. And, likewise with the timeline that you have created in your life, you have, been around a lot of currencies and a lot of, great big things that take place, sometimes unbeknownst to the average person, but you've also done some very public things for nonprofit organizations and for communities that tend to have been overlooked historically, such as young African American girls who have, for whatever reason, found themselves without access to some of the opportunities that their white counterparts may have, had access to, or the wealthier counterparts, even within the same ethnic group, may have had access to. What is driving you at the core of your being? Because you are, I think, a walking example of what the American economy is turning into, which is someone who understands how to navigate the money markets, and then someone who, once they do understand that and have spent their time doing that, still gets an opportunity and takes the opportunity to support those in some of the least desirable parts of the country. What is driving you to do that?
Well, it's been very interesting. I think anybody who knows me knows that I talk about my friends and my mentors all the time, and so what I've experienced in my life is a lot of people that have believed in me and have given me opportunities to really prove what I can do, and so and especially in entrepreneurship, a lot of folks just don't get that opportunity. And so it's not fair, and there are a lot of brilliant people that are willing to work as hard as possible to make things happen and to build and grow and provide for their families and their communities. And so, been committed to ensuring that, from a especially career development and, an entrepreneurship standpoint, as many people as possible that I touch can, experience some of the things that I've experienced, and also benefit from my network and those that I know and trust. And so one specific group that I work with closely closely and have worked as a founder for, I guess, about 3 years now. Was an organization called Teach 'em to Fish. It's a business incubator. It's actually a ministry, but we work in Prince George's County in Maryland, and our goal is to help folks that have either been underserved or have been offenders at points in time get a fresh start and become small business owners. And so we've put together an incubator. One, we purchased a barbershop. This is our first incubator. And we are empowering folks to become barbers, stylists, and we're teaching them how to run a shop. And so that's, it is a very, very challenging business. I think, it comes with all of the different nuances that any business would face. It's, very cash flow heavy and sensitive, requires a great deal of marketing. Certainly the personnel management side is always, always interesting. And what we've tried to do is create a safe space for folks to learn. We are ensuring that they are, getting, an understanding of how to do their books, how to, they've got all the proper licenses, they've got access to mentors and other individuals that have, successfully grown these, barbershops and other, beauty salons, etc. And so we're going to, in 2 years, they will have learned how to run a shop and have demonstrated success, and they will actually go out on their own and open up their own shop. And we will help them, navigate that process, but they will do it on their own. And so we're looking at a number of other potential opportunities to do that in other fields. So, we're very interested in technology and coding and mobile application development and all the kind of the hot buzzwords that you're hearing today. But these careers are excellent places for people to be able to build their own business. And a lot of times these individuals do not have the same access to kind of, we'll call it the innovation side of technology. And so we want to make sure that changes, and that, all the brilliant people that, have the capabilities and the ability to learn can gain the expertise required to go out and build their own businesses, serve their communities, and, ultimately become successful. And I think if we can, I think that's certainly possible, and I think we will do it. And, we will work as we can in Prince George's County and work with anybody else who is, around the nation that is interested in doing a similar thing. So we're excited about it, and, our fellows in the program are fantastic. They've enjoyed it, and they're working their butts off. So, it's a great thing, and I think it's important, that folks get that chance to, to really learn and grow and understand what they can do.
Wow. I just thank you for sharing that. And it's, it's coming from someone like yourself who, as I, want to reiterate, has cut your teeth in, on Wall Street. You've been all throughout the legislation, understanding and helping to fight for what, business owners, entrepreneurs, and people who are interested in seeing their dreams go forward need, which is access to capital in a reasonable way. You've, been doing what you're doing through Capital Bridge to continue along that same vein and continuing to research additional ways that people can fund their dreams and gain access to capital. But on the opposite side of that, helping people who have the capital to invest in others do so in as conservative way as possible, yielding the greatest returns from them as a business venture. And then you are also spending time, your own time, helping people who really need the help. And this is why I believe that opportunities will continue to pop up, like the GoFundMe, like the Indiegogos, like even other, crowdsourcing or crowdfunding sites, because people still want to see that attachment to something
Absolutely.
that's good and something that's socially beneficial to the masses take place. And that in itself is very, very big thinking that is taking place on the cellular level. And I thank you for sharing that and all of your information with us this week on this edition of Kickfannie's Big Thinking with Akia Garnett. Please do us a favor and give us your URL or ways in which people can connect with you if they're interested in learning more about the services that you offer.
And so you can visit my website. It is www.capitalbridgeholdings.com. My email address is nicholas.jordan@capitalbridgellc.com. And happy to connect with anybody that's interested in doing business with the federal government. Anybody interested in trying to gain access to capital, and if you have a heart for some of the the nonprofit work that we discussed as well, would love to talk about ways to get you involved in that as well.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Akia. I appreciate the time.
You're absolutely welcome. Visit us online, Kickfannie.com.
You've been listening to Kickfannie's Big Thinking with Akia Garnett, a Kickfannie production. Akia Garnett is a Kickfannie.com contributor, and she's CEO for Brand Builder and a national columnist for Minority Business Entrepreneur magazine, a leading source in supplier diversity and inclusion. Be sure to join Akia for Tuesday Branding on social media when she brings news from across all platforms for small business owners and entrepreneurs all day, starting with the Akia Garnett Show, 10 a.m. Eastern, and Kickfannie's Big Thinking with Akia Garnett at 6 p.m. Eastern, ending with My Brand Chat on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. See the full Tuesday lineup at Kickfannie.com and AkiaGarnett.com. And we'll see you next week on Kickfannie's Big Thinking with Akia Garnett.